Hi historians, it's Mrs. Tyler. Today we are doing Unit 4, Notes 5. This is Part 1. We will be using pages 12, 13, and 14 in our notes packet, but also I'm weaving in the game, a simulation game, that's also on pages 15 and 16. So here's page 15, and when you get to certain slides, I'm going to have you pick a number, and you will write the number into the circle of each of the wedge, and then based on that circle, it's kind of a choose your own adventure. Then you go ahead and you fill in what happens to you in the little wedge of the wheel there. Okay, and then on the back side of that page, there are a couple questions throughout where I'm going to ask you to be reflecting on some of the things we've been talking about, and we're just going to check to see that you're understanding some of the things that we need to cover. All right, so we're going to start off with some of the simulation games. So the chapel is ready. The reception room is set. The bride is dressed. Your heart is pounding. It is wedding day. You fix yourself in the mirror one last time before you head out. You're looking sharp. Bellboy, make sure all my guest luggage is taken to their rooms, and make it snappy. The year's 1914. You're a 20-year-old male employed as a bellhop at the world-famous Mission Inn Hotel in Riverside, California. The city of Riverside is one of the wealthiest towns per capita income in all of the United States. This is where you get to work. You love the tips that come with a busy wedding season, but your favorite part of your job is seeing all the famous faces that come to stay at the hotel, like this guy right here. No, it's just the Crown Prince of Sweden. No worries. So, on page 15, where it says Mission Inn, in the circle, would you please write down one of those numbers, 1 through 6, and you're going to find out which famous person you met while working at the Mission Inn Hotel. Okay, so if you chose number 1, this is who you get to meet. You meet Helen Keller, American author, political activist, and lecturer. She's the first deaf-blind person to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree. So in your on your wedge, you write Helen Keller. She wrote you a nice thank you note. Whatever's in bold and capitalized, that's what you're going to write in the wedge for your experience. Okay, if you chose number 2, you meet Albert Einstein, German-born theoretical physicist. He developed the general theory of relativity, one of the 2 pillars of modern physics. He did your college science homework for you. If you chose number 3, you get to meet Teddy Roosevelt, 26th President of the United States from 1901 to 1909. He invites you for an outing to visit Redwood National Park on your day off. Okay, Booker T. Washington is who you meet if you chose number 4. He's an African-American educator, author, orator, and advisor to presidents of the United States. You serve him and Mr. Miller, your boss, during a formal dinner. If you chose number 5, you get to meet John D. Rockefeller. We talked about him earlier in Unit 4 notes. He's the American business magnate and philanthropist, co-founder of the Standard Oil monopoly. He gives you a $100 tip for carrying up his bags. And if you chose number 6, you get Henry Ford. You met Henry Ford. He's an American industrialist, founder of Ford Motor Company. We talked about him using the assembly line to make his automobile more affordable. He let you borrow his car for the weekend. All right. Into our notes. Europe in the early 1900s is what we call a powder keg, waiting for a spark that would result in an explosion of all-out war. In the early years of the 20th century, Europe had not seen a large-scale war between major European powers since the Napoleonic Wars. Nearly a century before, we had talked about those Napoleonic Wars and how Britain and France had kind of been off and on at war for over 100 years, way back when we were starting notes for Unit 2, and we were doing the You Be the President game. So we talked about that. Don't you miss the good old days when I invaded all of Europe? Militarism, the alliance system, imperialism, and nationalism created what we call a powder keg. Powder keg is a reference to back in the days when we used to ship gunpowder in kegs like that. And of course, if anything got close to it that could set it off, it would explode. Okay, so basically all of these conditions, plus the fact that there's some tensions between major European powers, and there's an assassination that takes place that is going to spark some issues that's going to basically lead to all-out war. So on page 12, militarism, glorifying military power and building up the army and navy to intimidate other nations and gain global influence is what you're going to highlight. In order to appear powerful and protect their empires and territories, European nations saw a rise in militarism. Militarism is a glorification of military power. In the years leading up to the outbreak of war, European countries were building up their armies for self-protection, intimidation, and national glory. Germany also focused on increasing the size of their naval power in order to directly compete with Great Britain's powerful navy. So on page 13, you're going to fill in M for main causes of World War I, M is for militarism. Countries are building up their militaries to intimidate other nations. Now, just having a powerful army or a large army is not necessarily a bad thing. It depends on how you're using it. If you're using it to kind of deter countries from messing with you and to protect your own people, that's totally fine. That's no big deal. But if you're using it to bully other countries into doing what you want them to do, then it kind of can create some animosity, some resentment between you and other countries. So just be prepared for that. Okay, the second ingredient for world war is an alliance system. So alliances are groups of nations joining together in a common effort to protect one another from a common enemy. While each nation was building up their own militaries, many countries were also forming alliances or agreements with other nations to defend one another. Okay. Two major European alliances were formed in the years leading up to the Great War. The Triple Alliance was formed between Great Britain, France, and Russia. The Triple Entente was formed between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. If one of the nations in an alliance was attacked, let's say, for example, Serbia does something to irritate the big old Austria-Hungary, and they attack little tiny Serbia, well, this little Serbia wouldn't stand a chance. But because Serbia has some big, powerful allies with like France and Great Britain and Russia, Serbia's not alone. He's got these big powerful buddies that'll have his back. That's kind of what alliances will do. Okay. With such an entanglement of alliances, violence between two countries quickly spreads to involve all of Europe. But we don't call this the Great European War. We've had lots of wars that involved many countries across Europe up to this point. What we hadn't had was an all-out world war. And what makes this a world war is something we talked about in notes 4. It's imperialism, expanding a nation's power and economic wealth by taking over and establishing colonies in other parts of the world. European nations had been competing to expand their empires by controlling territories and establishing colonies around the world. The United States had even started to expand when we gained territories in the Caribbean and the Pacific after the Spanish-American War. So we had kind of even dipped our own toe in the imperialism waters when we annexed Hawaii, when we helped Cuba gain independence from Spain, and then we gained Puerto Rico, when we took over the Philippines and Guam and some different areas to have a presence in other parts of the world. All the cool nations were doing it. So territories colonized by those imperialist powers were typically not always pleased with this arrangement. Some of them wanted to be independent from the colonial powers. Many ethnic groups resented being governed by faraway nations. Okay. So fill in imperialism. Here's an example of this. This is the British Empire in 1914. This right here is Britain. They also have Ireland. And then anything else in red is colonies or territories governed by the British Empire, part of the British Empire. So if Britain is involved in a war, then they're going to call on all of their little territories to send, or big territories, I guess, since they're all kind of bigger in size than their actual country, then they're going to end up sending troops to fight. And that's why in the background of this picture here we see World War I soldiers fighting for the British Empire, but they're from the subcontinent of India. Okay, so when an imperialist power went to war, the territories and colonies that they control were also expected to fight. The reason we call this a world war is because European powers had their colonies helping them fight. And the last ingredient needed to create the perfect storm to have a world war is this hyper-nationalism, this extreme patriotic devotion to one's country or nation. Now, nationalism on its own is not a terrible thing. You can be patriotic and it's great to love your country, but if you're doing it to the point of trying to use that as an excuse to take over other places, then you're going to cause a little bit of issues. You're going to cause some issues for other places. So as empires grew in size and power, people felt proud of their nation. Citizens were feeling more devoted to their home country. So the last letter that spells out main for main causes, we have militarism, alliances, imperialism, and now nationalism. Okay, citizens of those colonized territories and ethnic minority groups were also feeling patriotic to their ethnic group. Rejecting colonial authority, these smaller countries wanted to govern themselves, and tensions increased. For example, those Serbians that we talked about just a minute ago, living in southeastern Balkan region of Europe, they were governed by this Austro-Hungarian Empire here. They didn't want to be. Nationalism inspired a lot of the people in this, what we call the Balkan region, to have a burning desire for independence from Austrian rule. From June of 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife were visiting the Bosnian city of Sarajevo. Bosnia was controlled by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Franz Ferdinand was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. His uncle was the emperor at that point. His uncle had no male children to take over the throne. So when his uncle was going to die, then he was set to take the throne. But most Bosnians were Serbs by ethnicity, and they wanted to be unified with neighboring Serbia. They wanted independence from Austro-Hungarian rule. And so, as Franz Ferdinand's car drove through the streets of Sarajevo, Gavrilo Princip, this dude over here, he's a member of a Serbian nationalist group called the Black Hand, jumps out of the crowd, shoots the Archduke and his wife Sofia, and they both die within minutes. Okay, Austria-Hungary accuses Serbia of being behind the assassination, and they declare war on little tiny Serbia. This is a spark that sets off a powder keg in Europe. Okay, in our notes on page 12, there's Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Also, you have to know that World War I is the war of the epic mustache. There's going to be quite a few big old mustaches in this era. Heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, his assassination by Serbian nationalists sparked the start of World War I. On page 2 of our notes packet, I want you to write World War I begins in 1914. So back to our simulation game. There you are in the lobby, sitting down. Okay. As a result of working at the famous hotel, you're always trying to stay up to date on current events, just in case you rub elbows with someone famous in the elevator. Today you pick up the morning paper and you're interested to read about what has been going on in Europe with the war that recently broke out. This is the Archduke and his family. I don't always kill people, but when I do, I start World War I. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, is assassinated in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. Okay, my driver made a wrong turn. Shoot. There's the gun that was used by Gavrilo Princip. 1 week after Austria-Hungary's attack on Serbia, the 5 major European nations were all at war because of those alliances. Eventually, it will include 36 nations on 6 continents because of imperialism, like we talked about. So we have the Allied powers, Great Britain, France, Russia, Japan, Italy, and later on when the U.S. does join, we will join the Allied powers. We also have the Central powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire, which is what we know as Turkey today. Okay, so on that check for understanding on page 16, I want you to write down what are the main causes of World War I, and the hint is M-A-I-N. Militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism should have been your answers. What was the spark that started World War I? For number 2, you're supposed to be writing it on page 16 in this box. Okay, the spark was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Okay, as you read the paper, your mind goes to thinking about your grandma who still lives in Germany. Like 8 million other Americans, you're either of German or Austrian descent, and so you're secretly rooting for the Central Powers. Okay, Wilson declared the United States is going to be neutral. He didn't want his country pulled into a foreign war. Neutrality is the state of not taking sides, especially in a war or dispute. America had followed a policy of neutrality at the beginning of World War I. Americans soon began taking sides based on their immigration roots, but overall most of the country is rooting for the Allies, mainly because we had loaned, U.S. banks had heavily loaned money to the Allies, over $2 billion. We kind of want the Allies to win so that we can ensure repayment. People here in the United States start to feel, if they're of German ancestry, they start to feel a little bit of pressure and some discrimination for their German or Austrian heritage. and we'll finish up tomorrow.